Good afternoon. I'm going to continue on with some of the experiences that I had teaching, substitute teaching, using nonviolence, what I'd consider to be trying to be nonviolent with the children in various different circumstances. Okay, while children are kept quiet by threats, you don't know what powdered keg lies dormant within, powder keg of anger or whatever it is. I substitute taught in a fourth grade classroom at Rockwell Gardens Housing Project School in Chicago. This school was tied with at least one other school as being the worst school I ever subbed in. I told the class I didn't believe in punishing children. There was a boy sitting in one of the front seats who looked like he was about 20 years old. But the rest of the children were fourth graders. The children in that class went wild, running around and carrying on for hours. Girls started flirting with the boys, and I warned them not to, saying it could be dangerous. But of course, they didn't pay any attention to me. The boys were working on some commercial book covers that there were, like somebody wanted to sell them something, and the school accepted these book covers, which were in a pile, and they were using them to make pretend rifles, and then they were stashing them up above in the coat room. In the mayhem, I came upon a girl lying down on the floor in the hallway and a boy above her in a pretend sexual pose. The boy saw me and got away, and I just stared in the eyes at the ridiculous girl on the floor, who ashamedly got up. A smart-alecky boy playing this game said to me, "Do you want to be next?" Any or all of this was material for suspension, but what good would it do? A day or two off school for the kids, perhaps a beating. The latter was what I was trying to avoid. And what kind of parents did they have? Might some of them be drug addicts? A woman finally came in from the office or wherever and scared them into their seats and gave speeches to them. You'd never know what lurked within them if you had come in at that moment after she got them in their seats. And you sitting there so sweetly and quietly. By not suspending or punishing them, I allowed them a relatively safe way to get their steam off. There was one serious adult, namely myself, present to help. And there was a lot of opportunity for me to give feedback so they could learn what they were doing. I could point out what they should be doing. They didn't do what I said or understand the reasons, but maybe someday they would remember. It was better for them to learn there than in the schoolyard or on the street with no serious adult present. Good behavior is more important than reading or math because learning it would help them deal with life in nonviolent ways later on. It would also help society by lowering the crime rate. But if a teacher gains control of a difficult classroom by suspending the first child who makes an infraction of her rules and then lets the fear of that example reign through the day, she would be force-feeding the reading and math to many difficult children who aren't listening and meanwhile aren't learning what is most important, good behavior. The well-behaved children might be learning reading and math, but teaching the troubled children behavior would be better as a priority because it's more important for society. The well-behaved children may have other chances to learn reading, but badly behaved children need to get practice in regard to behavior as soon as possible. In my experience, so-called good disciplinarians don't like teaching or the badly behaved kids. By so-called good, I mean those who effectively control very difficult classes in the short term through threats, punishment, or bribes. Although I had extreme difficulty controlling certain classes, in fact, often I did not control them, I really liked teaching and the difficult kids. My cousin worked in the inner city for years. He had, I think, perfect control of the classroom. When kids didn't do what he wanted, he'd say, "You can go home and do whatever, the reading or whatever it was they were doing." They'd immediately shape up because this was a threat of suspension. But he said he never enjoyed his job there. And I remember subbing with a so-called good disciplinarian. She was subbing in the discipline room where children who had misbehaved were sent. The administrator really wanted her to stay at his school. He really liked her. I wish they'd asked me the way they asked her, but she didn't like her job, but I loved it. Child care centers and schools overemphasize the immediate physical safety of children without paying enough attention to their spiritual well-being. Well, this is in my experience. I have noticed this in my experience. Maybe other child cares are different. The children should learn good values, respect, how and why to behave well, etc. This could be the priority above their safety. The terror put into kids in daycares in an effort to keep them safe doesn't allow them to experiment or learn better ways of controlling their own situations rather than waiting for people to scare them into behaving correctly. So in other words, if they get more understanding of why they should be acting a certain way, because this happens, this tends to happen when you do that, if they learn more things like that rather than, oh, I'm scared now, so I'll do whatever they say. Oh, I'm not scared now, so I'll just take any chance and get myself killed. No, that is not recommended. Okay, I once worked at El Centro del Niño, a child care center in Milwaukee. My boss was hyper about injuries. We had to worry about the children not getting the least little scratch. Eric Barber was a 2-year-old boy under my care. He was so wild when he first came, the other 2 workers didn't want him. He wanted to climb all over everything. I wanted to teach him through natural consequences, and they allowed him to be almost exclusively under my care. I'd often warn him, be careful, it's dangerous. Then if he'd fall a little, it would be a good lesson. I tried not to let him know I was watching every move he made. There was a little mountain in the backyard. He'd start climbing it like Evel Knievel. I didn't want him to grow up to become one of those guys that just do anything and expect someone to come running and save them. So I'd look away as he'd go up, but I'd have to watch closely at the same time without letting him know, especially since the child care center didn't want any scratches, let alone the big falls that I did not want. After being under my care for about 5 months, Eric listened to me and behaved well. I had told him many times, I'll never hit you no matter what you do. I had to use the word hit rather than punish because he was only 2 years old. When we went, and he didn't know the word punish. When we went on an outing after about 5 months, he listened to me when I told him to stay nearby because it was dangerous. He stayed close to me while another boy, Ricky, ran all around when I told him, stay here. It's dangerous. I could see the difference. And Ricky was not under my care that much. I guess I better stop now rather than go too long. Thank you for listening.